Hey, founders, Kirk Michie here with the last piece of the funnel. So we've been through 15 sections. The top part of the funnel, the first five, were all about how do you decide to sell, when do you decide to sell, what multiple you're likely to get, and how do you kind of pick your number and make the next decision. The middle of the funnel was all about how you put your team in place, how you structure and strategize on going to market, and how do you position yourself for the best outcome. And then the last pieces have been about, what do you do when you're fielding the offers? How do you compare them? Which things will you agree to? Which things will you not? What are your net proceeds after tax going to look like? And how do you plan for that? So the last piece in most deals, but something that thoughtful founders consider very early on, is what's going to happen to my people? So look, this has a lot to do with what kind of buyer you have. With a strategic buyer, depending on how big they are, how big you are, and why they're acquiring you. Maybe they want your geography or your service or product set. They might let you continue to stand alone, run like you are. They may or may not need some of your staff people, like your CFO or controller, your head of HR, administrative people, where in their headquarters, they might have those functions handled and not want to duplicate them. They're probably not buying your company just so they can eliminate those expenses and take more to the bottom line. That's more of a private equity kind of thing to do, but that might be part of it. And, it certainly wouldn't make sense in a big public company to have multiple HR departments or have the HR departments within departments. So it kind of depends on the buyer. And then with a private equity buyer, generally, they're going to want to leave things alone unless this is part of kind of some consolidation strategy on their part. They're going to want to have your people continue on because the private equity people don't have operating expertise. So they're not going to step in and run anything or take any, kind of responsibilities away. They're probably going to add to your workload with some other things they need in addition to you doing your regular job and some goals you got to hit in the future. They might actually net add to the number of people. They might add in a controller or a CFO if you don't already have one. It might get you to a new PEO to handle payroll in a different way. What's going to happen to your people between a strategic and financial buyer? Not completely clear, but here's the thing. Here's the thing you want to do with your people. First of all, I know you want to tell everybody that you're selling because you want to be transparent. You're a thoughtful person. Don't. You're bound by an NDA. That's going to hurt you. Your people are going to start to worry about their jobs. They're going to get their resumes current. If they're critical people, they might leave before the transaction ends. And now you've got a gap in your org chart. You got to explain that. The other thing, don't overpromise. If your people come to you because they find out, either because you told them, because you disregarded my first piece of advice, or because they found out they were in an industry conference and somebody let it slip that their company was thinking about acquiring your company, avoid the temptation to say, don't worry about it, you're going to be fine. I'm not going to sell to anybody that's going to lay people off. And if you get laid off, I'll take care of you. Okay, you might have just created a legally actionable thing there. Don't do that. I know it's tempting to tell your people they'll be okay, but you don't get to control that unless you're willing to say no to a deal, unless by demanding that you get to control that. And chances are you're not going to do that. And your transaction advisor is going to tell you to not do that, right? So in most scenarios, your people are going to be fine. What I mean by fine, they're going to still have their jobs. They might have the titles change. If you're merging into another company that's similar, they might have their pay slightly adjusted. That can be compensated for in transaction structure. And yeah, some of them might get riffed. And if you know they're going to get riffed, even though, it'll come out of your proceeds, if they're meaningful to you and you want to make sure they're taken care of, you can let your transaction advisor know that, you're going to pay out some transaction bonuses. And for people who are critical to the go forward part of the business, you might consider voluntarily paying some transaction bonuses to make sure that those people are willing to move forward. You might even structure it so that they get, say, half the cash at closing and the buyer hangs on to the other half of the cash to give them a retention payment through payroll a year from closing. So what happens to your people is not completely in your control, but you can signal your intentionality around it. And a little pro tip, if you don't care what happens to your people after a sale, you're definitely not a Candor Advisors client, but we can find you an investment bank that'll work with you anyway, because we think it's important to take care of your people in your sale. even if you don't give them all transaction bonuses. Anyway, one last bit of information. You will tell them right before the deal completely closes or immediately after the deal closes, usually in an all hands meeting, or if you're in a big company, a series of, kind of back-to-back meetings so that you don't set the rumor mill afire. But you are going to want to communicate to your people from kind of the founder's mouth, if you will. Here's what I'm selling. Here's whether I'm going to stay around or not. Here's what we understand about their plans to be. And in some cases, you're going to want to actually have the HR person and maybe even the division head or CEO of the acquiring company or entity there with you to make the announcement, to make the introduction. It might be a little clunky, but it has to happen. And at some point, you want to be able to reassure your people that, you didn't not think about them, because you want them to stay around. You want their loyalty to continue on as part of your legacy. All right, thanks. Congratulations. You've done a great deal. Now move on, be happy, go crush retirement.